Hello and welcome to Minter Dialogue, episode number 177. Today is Sunday, the 10th of January 2016. Happy New Year! So as many of you might have recognized, I took off the month of December, but the podcast is now back on its weekly schedule. And we're going to start off with a cracker. This interview is with Nick Wheeler, CEO and founder of Charles Tyrwhitt, not Tyrwhitt, as you will later find out. Charles Tyrwhitt is a privately held men's fashion brand based in London. The story of Charles Tyrwhitt is loaded with great lessons learned and certainly is an example of how to evolve and thrive in these changing times. In this conversation, we discuss the challenges of moving from a catalog business to an online retailer, the importance of stores in the mix, Nick's key performance indicators, and his single most important advice for entrepreneurs. A stimulating way to begin the year, I'm sure you'll agree. Welcome to the Minter Dialogue podcast, where we discuss brand marketing with a focus on all things digital. I am Minter Dial, your host and author of The Mindset. That's MYNDSET.com, where branding gets personal. You'll find the show notes to the blog for the upcoming interview. Let's cut to the quick and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the Minter Dialogue. Today, as I had announced, I have a special guest in the form of Nick Wheeler, an old schoolmate, and the CEO and founder of Charles Tyrwhitt. I hope I got that spelled right. So, Nick, tell us who you are and what you're up to.
You've got it spelled right, but you haven't actually pronounced it right.
Gosh,
it's Charles Tyrwhitt. Very important.
Yeah.
What did I started this business back in 1986, and I always think of myself as being a tortoise in the entrepreneurial world. I think entrepreneurs are either hares or tortoises. Hares grow a business, build it fast, sell it, float it, move on to the next. Tortoise is just slow and steady, and I've just been growing the business over the last, slightly depressingly, it's now 30 years, but growing up for 30 years, and I've actually loved pretty much every minute, except for when I went bust and nearly went bust, and a few other sort of mishaps.
Well, they say that failure is something you need to have, a wing on your shoulders as an entrepreneur. Do you agree?
I think you learn a hell of a lot more from your failures than you do from anything else. When I went bust, I learnt so much. It becomes so painful that you actually take it in and you learn it. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time, they have mentors and they read books and they listen to other people. But when you're actually doing it yourself and making the mistake, you actually learn from it.
It's the scars on your body, and you can look at them and remind yourself about that. What would be the key learning that you took, if you were willing to share, for others to try and have a share of your scar?
The key learning would be focus. I went bust in 1994, and I very nearly went bust again in 2007. And I went busted both times for exactly the same reason, and it's that I lost focus. And I think as an entrepreneur, when you're running a business, you get very wound up with what you do. And when things start to go well, you start to potentially become a little bit bored. And you start to look for other things to do. So in 1994, I had a great little business. We were doing £2.5 million sales, making £250,000 profit. And I was just bored. I just felt, I looked around, and Jimmy Goldsmith and was being an amazing sort of blockbuster entrepreneur around the world. So I thought, if he can do it, I can do it. If he can do acquisitions and asset strip, I can do it. So I bought a little chain of children's clothes shops. I was a men's mail order shirt business. What I thought I could do to a children's retail clothes chain, I have no idea. But I lost more money in 3 months than I made in the last 3 years and went bust.
So the tortoise didn't go back into its shell, though. It came back out rearing, right?
The tortoise comes out thinking, right, actually, I'm a shirt seller, and I'm going to bloody well stick to shirt selling. And it's funny because, and that's exactly what I did. And moved the clock forward 10 years, and we were at £40 million sales, making £4 million profit. I had a great business. But time, people sort of, the problem with time is you forget the lessons, or you can forget the lessons. And what I did is I effectively did exactly the same thing. I mean, it's just embarrassing. I used to say to people in the business, right, I don't want you to be afraid of making mistakes. It's very important. You push the boundaries. You go out there and you make a difference. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, as long as you don't make the same mistake twice. So then in 2005 to 2007, I went into I went into women's and, slightly embarrassingly, children's clothes again. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable.
Well, there is a natural link to it.
What in terms of
women? If you're going to women, and then they naturally would shop for the women, but customers will naturally also want to shop for children. So
the trouble is that the women customers, there aren't enough. What we sell is we sell classic men's shirts, and men are actually quite funny about the shirts they wear, and men tend to buy their own shirts. And one thing I did discover over that phase is that men don't like buying women's clothes, and they certainly don't like buying children's clothes.
Yeah, so there wasn't a crossover.
So there was just no crossover. So we ended up with just a shed load of stock in women's and children's clothing that we just couldn't sell. 9 million quid's worth of stock we couldn't sell. The bank went absolutely ballistic, and it was very nearly curtains again.
Well, the funny thing about this is that these issues crop up, and especially the term focus, or the issue to need to focus, crop up and tend to hit you in different ways. So that you looking back, obviously it feels like you did the same mistake, but it comes up in different formats. And I'm thinking specifically today, 2016, we have so many choices in resources and opportunities that are popping up all the time. It becomes awfully difficult to keep that focus, where the selection of choices might be in a completely different field. You're no longer thinking about going into children and women's, but you have so many choices in terms of media and maybe countries. So how are you managing to keep that focus in today's crazy world where we've got so many options?
I think the really important thing, you have to just sort of try to boil your business down to a few key fundamentals. And within this business, I've tried to boil it down to, basically, it's quality of product. It's value for money with us. And it's levels of service. Since I started the business, I have always said we will bend over backwards for a customer. Some of the customers do push the boundaries.
Naturally.
We have a sort of a 6-month guarantee, and we have people, maybe I shouldn't say this, but people who, they come into the stores and they literally get their iPhones out and they say, right, I'm just going to put in 5 months and 29 days so I can bring all this stuff back and get new stuff. And they're so upfront and blatant, typically in the States. But it's so they push the boundaries. But ultimately, you mustn't let if you believe in service, you can't let a few people sort of stop you from doing what you believe is right. So it's quality, value, service. And then also I just think, right, I want the people in this business to love working in this business. If you can get that, you're halfway to having a great business. And then I want the customers to love this business. And I also want the suppliers to love the business. And I think you just try to have a few simple rules. Those are my rules in running the business. And you try and have a few simple rules, and then you find that you can cut through all the, because you're right, there's so much stuff going on. There's so many ideas and so many channels you can sell through, so many countries. But you just try to keep it focused. I think we had a problem where we did launch in Germany and in the US before we should have done. We should have stayed in the UK. People forget that the UK is a big market. Yeah. You can sell a hell of a lot of shirts in the UK. There's a great example of a cement company in, I think, Ohio. They're a $5 billion business. They don't sell any cement outside Ohio. We could sell a hell of a lot of shirts inside the UK. And we went to Germany and the US too soon. Before you have to absolutely sort of button up your home market. Before you go, you get distracted and become very excited about overseas expansion.
Well, one of the things, Nick, about CT is that you're a privately held company, and you're the majority shareholder yourself. So you can manage your ambition in that regard. And I guess you mentioned before, you can also get bored if you do it. So how do you balance that notion of excitement, development, growth, and your other expectations for profitability and so on?
I think when you start the business, if you're a tortoise, you always have to keep control of the business. I've always thought this, as soon as I lost control of I've got 95% of the business. As soon as if you lose control of the business, you're effectively out, because you'll make a mistake at some point,
right? And
the other shareholders will chuck you out, because they will all have different agendas. I think the great thing about owning the business effectively, having complete control and owning your own business, is that you can set a long term. You have a long term view, and you can set where the business is going, and you can be fairly unwavering despite the sort of couple of big mistakes I've made. you can be fairly unwavering and very long term. And I think it's a bit of a problem in the UK, actually, because people just don't tend to do that. Mm-hmm. They get very excited and they sell their business far too early.
Because everywhere they look around, everybody else is doing, the Goldsmiths of the world, they're rushing around, doing more, and that sort of, the lure, well, why aren't you going off to Shanghai and opening up there? And the sort of part of you might sort of say, well, yeah, okay. But that's the type of temptation your employees also feel?
I think what we have here is we have this thing, we have a not-to-do list. So, China is on our not-to-do list. The number of people who told me to go to China is just, thousands of people. Thousands of people want to take us to China. Yeah. I just don't want to do it. Yeah. Like the cement factory in Ohio. I've got a hell of a lot of shirts still in the UK. And the US is slightly bigger than the UK in terms of our sales, but it's 5 times bigger market. Germany is twice as big a market. We don't sell as much in Germany as we do in the UK. Until I've got those at least 2 other territories sorted, we don't want to go sort of just confusing the business by going elsewhere.
Right. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, Nick, was the evolution of the business, notwithstanding the bigger hiccups, but from catalog to online and having stores and online. How have you managed that transition? Because I've worked with a number of other catalog companies looking at that, and it's a vente par correspondance. It's very similar, but actually it's not. So how has that evolution been for you? And how much of your business, let's say, if you could tell us, is split between if you have that online catalog and in-store?
Well, I think we were very early into online. And I think when the internet came along, right in the early days, when a lot of people didn't even think it would work for selling clothes, I just knew that was just manna from heaven. I felt like the luckiest bloke in the whole world. I'd started a mail order business, which a mail order was pretty down market, pretty tacky. I started it when I was at university, so I had no choice. Sure. I had to go to the odd lecture. I did geography, so I didn't have to go to many lectures. But I did have to go to the odd lecture, so I had a mail order business. And it was sort of, it was great, but it was very niche, and it was a little bit down market, because it was mail order. And then the internet comes along, and suddenly the internet actually makes it sexy, and not necessarily down market, and certainly not down market. Now there's a hell of a lot. Well, every business is online, and what we found is that the business. I think we've grown at 22% every year for the last 24 years, whatever it is. And I think the internet completely made that happen. And we do 75% of our business now is online and on the telephone. The telephone is a very small proportion of that. The vast majority of orders come through online.
So a lot of people who are using the catalogue are going to be going back online to make the order.
The catalogue is a driver onto online, absolutely. As it is a driver into the stores. So 25% of the sales are through the stores. I think we've got about 25 stores. And, the important thing is that the customer chooses where they want to shop and how they want to shop. And a lot of people get the brochure and go online. And that's how they want to do it. And it works very well. And when they're online, hopefully you can, through a decent website, you can maybe persuade them that they might want to buy a few other things as well as the things they decided.
Right, there's the conversions and all that good stuff. So, Nick, you've got these 25 stores, but how do you, and you're doing something like £190 million, right? That was the last fiscal year. How do you decide whether you need to be opening more stores? Is 25% the right balance? How do you configure that? Because that I think this is one of the big challenges, especially for the people who are living on and off.
I think it's a very good question, and we ask ourselves that question a lot. We look around. We're very keen to grow the business. I don't want to. I've always said if this business doesn't grow at 10% a year, I will get rid of it. I just won't be interested anymore. Because through growth comes the excitement that I like, that I love about the business. And we've looked around at other people, and there are people who are opening 30 stores a year. Sure. And we say, why aren't we opening 30 stores a year? And it's something that we're grappling with. And to be honest, we've been going 30 years, and I've got 25 stores. That's on average less than 1 store a year. We have a policy now. We're opening 5 stores a year.
I see.
So it's more than we have been. And it's something we want to sort of, we don't want to rush it. The world equally is littered with people who've overexpanded in retail units. And when you look at the long-term trends, you can see that retail sales are coming down as a percentage of total sales. If you look at the total shirt market, retail sales are coming down, online sales are going up. Do you really want to be going hell for leather into that declining sector of the market, or do you want to be investing more in the online? The problem is there's only so much you can invest in the online. There's only we're spending a lot of money on getting all our systems up to date. We're launching a completely new website on the 19th of Jan, actually, which is quite exciting.
Wow.
Yeah, it is exciting. Quite scary, but quite exciting.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's extremely important in this discussion is when you talk about stores, you own your own stores. Do you have, I'm not familiar with it, but do you have other retail partners, or is that sort of verboten? Because you talked about control, and I would say that, if you look at certain players, having control and your own stores is one of the keys to managing to keep consistency in your brand.
Absolutely. We have had a franchise arrangement in the past in overseas territories. We've done it in the Middle East. We've done it in Spain. And it just doesn't work. For me, it doesn't work. I don't know. I hope I'm not a control freak, but I just think nobody loves this brand as much as we love this brand. And we have to do it ourselves. So we have to own and manage every single store, and we have to do it how we want to do it because we love it more than anybody else.
When I think about it, I think about stores. I think about the contact, the handshaking per se, the visual, the people relationship is at the most human level as opposed to via a screen. So the stores provide that, but they also typically provide lockdown leases, profitability challenges. So how do you put that into the mix? How do you evaluate whether 5 is the right number to be opening per year? Because you want your 10% growth. You also want your brand to stay controlled. Is there the other number? One of the questions I was going to ask you, Nick, was: is there a number that you read every morning that tells you how your business is taking over, other than of course sales? But what is there a number within that's like the sort of the key to understanding the success that you've had?
I think the thing I'm most interested in every morning is the score we get from this FIFO thing. FIFO.
So tell us about the FIFO.
FIFO is an independent online feedback company. So whenever anybody buys from us, they get an email from FIFO asking them to rate the quality of our service and the quality of our product from excellent to poor. It takes 2 seconds, 15, 20 seconds. They can write a little comment if they want, and a lot of people do. And so every morning I will get a percentage figure for all the people who've given feedback in the UK, US, Germany, mail order and retail, and Australia, actually. In fact, I completely forgot to mention Australia. Having said all that, down under. And I get a percentage of people who rate us as excellent or good, both on the quality of service and the quality of product. And I just think if you can get your quality of service to be absolutely, which I reckon, we would hope to be over 98% of people rating our quality of service excellent or good. And sometimes we get problems, and when we have problems, typically in deliveries, we know about those problems often before the delivery companies know about the problems. We've had problems going into the States, where at JFK they've had problems, with shipment, inbound coming in from the UK, and these conveyors have bust, and we've rung up the courier, and they have no idea they have a problem. We know about it because the customer tells us, and we get that instant feedback.
So they're a really strategic component of your business, the FIFO folks.
Yeah, really important. Yeah. Really important.
So when you talk about customer service, how do you manage customer service? Because in the end of the day, today you have, the customer goes wherever they want. You have FIFO, which is sort of one way to channel it, but you also have to deal with the telephone calls. Do you outsource that? How do you approach customer service in this sort of multi-digital channel world?
I think we have an objective with customer service is to be like the Heineken customer service, where you walk down a corridor and at the end there's a very dusty door, that advert where you open the door and that's the customer service department, and there's just nothing in there because they're saying they just don't do anything wrong. And what we try to do with customer service, absolutely no way would we ever sub it out. We do it all in-house. We have call centres here in London Bridge and in Milton Keynes. We'd never send it out to India, even in our own call centres. we want to do it here and we want to have control over it. And it's about looking at the reasons for the calls and the reasons for the emails and the reason for the feedback, and really getting to the bottom of it and working out how you can stop those things happening. If you do things right every single time, the customer doesn't want much. They want to order their shirt, they want to call up, or they want to be online, they want it to work perfectly normally, perfectly well. They want the shirt to arrive on time in a box, in a condition that they expect, and they want it to be the right size and no quality problems. And then if that happens, they don't contact you. So you don't have a customer service team. If you're absolutely perfect, you don't have a customer service team. And that's what we'd like to aim for. I mean, obviously, it is not quite like that.
No, of course.
Customer service doesn't quite work like that. But we've got a big project going on at the moment, which we call Skyline, which is just really getting to the bottom of every single contact point, why it's happening, and working on the root cause of it, and trying to stop, to change the business to make sure that those problems don't happen.
One of the questions I was going to ask you was, with regard to customer service, you're in 4 or 5 countries. Do you see any differences in the way that people complain and relate? I mean, you mentioned the Americans with their 5-month and 29 days. Do you find that a certain class of people criticize more, so it's harder to get the A+?
It's actually, the scores are pretty consistent. Probably the happiest customers are actually Australia, which I find amazing, because Australia, we ship we have one warehouse in Milton Keynes, and we ship everything from there, which, if you live in Northampton, it's fine, because it goes an hour away. If you're living in Australia, it's a hell of a distance. And actually, but the Australians are the happiest customers. But I think there are different traits in car. Germany obviously don't use credit card as much. They have credit. Which is a bit of a nightmare for us, because it means that they'll happily order 3 products knowing that they can send 2 back.
That's the German way.
Which is the German way. It is the German way. And that does cause... So German returns are very high. Not because they don't like the product, but just they're sending 2 back.
That's their tradition. It's been that way.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that causes issues. But generally, I think we're lucky in a way in that we deal... our customer is basically men. And men tend to be, they're creatures of habit, and they can't be bothered quite often to change those habits, and which is good for us. Once we get a customer, we hope we've got a customer for life. I think with men, you're more likely to have them for life than with women, who are constantly testing, trying to improve things.
So if you were, I've got 2 last questions for you, Nick, before you have to run. If you were approaching a new country, would you how would you go about that? How would you advise, or how would you even think about doing it? Store, online only, one city first? What would be your leitmotif? What have you learned to date?
Well, for us, we obviously are predominantly an online business, and so without a shadow of a doubt, we would go online, and that's what we did. It's what we did in Germany. It's what we did in the US. It's what we've done in Australia. We've got 6 shops in the US now, but we've got no shops in Germany and no shops in Australia.
I see.
And Australia is a sort of we went from the reason we went to Australia actually is we looked at what we were doing in Australia, and we saw we were doing £1 million sales a year in Australia from doing nothing. We thought, crikey, Australians like they like our shirt. This could work. So we started doing some inserts and some just small amount of marketing in Australia, and the next year we did £50 million sales in Australia. Nobody on the ground, no office in Australia, nothing. And we just realised that there was it was possible to do an online business overseas without having people on the ground, without having overhead, and you can really drive a great business. So we are looking at other territories at the moment, which we will go into online only.
Wow. Okay. So last question about the brand. So you mentioned how important the brand is for you. When you're talking about hiring employees that are happy, committed, what are the types of things you look for to understand that this is the right thing? It's one of the hardest things to do is to understand the long-term excitement, if you will, of a prospective employee. What are the criteria you look for that are fitting into your brand when you're talking about employees?
I think you just try to... Oh God! It's a difficult one.
Well, there's the suppliers. As you were saying before, you want to have your brand spread out. You want your customers happy. You want your employees. Yeah. And the challenge in today's world is that your employees a lot of them, 75% of your business, are happening via a website where there's no employee interaction per se. So the issue of that the employee excitement, the employer brand isn't necessarily immediately transmittable or transmissible, I'm not sure, to the customer because it's going through an interface that is the internet.
Yeah, but I think the employee. I suppose the point about employees is that we have an office here in London Bridge. We've only been here a year, and we moved here we moved particularly down to London Bridge because it's the sort of place where you can find buildings that have single big floors. Because in the old building it was a real rabbit warren, and I used to. We were in White City, and I used to wander around. I'd find a door, open the door, and find six people in there.
Who were you?
So I had no idea who they were or what they did, and it was just sort of ridiculous. And I wanted it on one floor so everybody could feed off each other. And you have to choose people who are, I don't know what it is. It's just positive. People who feel like anything's possible. They won't take no for an answer. In a way, I suppose I'm trying to find people who are a bit like I was 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Where you will kick down any door to get something done. Mm-hmm. It's about getting on and doing things. It's not about talking about things. Mm-hmm. It's about doing things. And the great thing about having everybody on one floor is that, or the danger of having them all split up into different behind closed doors is nobody knows what anybody else is doing. And hopefully when you're on one floor, it all just sort of rubs off on everybody. Mm-hmm. And you all understand that there's a common goal, where we're all going, what we're trying to do. And you have people who just believe in the business. They believe in the business, they love the business, and they love doing what they're doing, and they love the people they work with as well. That's one of the really important things. I have new starters every 2 weeks. I sit down with all the new starters. And really, I talk to them for about half an hour about how I started the business, and they will look rather bored. And then
I'm sure not.
And then they
that's really cool to go and do that, by the way. I think that's a brilliant thing to be able to go in and see you. There's 750 employees or so in the company, and an opportunity to hang with you and to hear the story from your mouth. That's really great that you have the energy to do that.
Well, it's amazing how many people say, they come from businesses, and we've got about 1,000 people now, actually, but they come from businesses that are even smaller than this one, and they say they've never even seen the founder. Yeah. They've just never even seen, let alone spoken to him. And it means a lot to them. It means a lot to hear it from me. But the one thing I say to them is I say, look, the thing I want you to really take away from this half hour is I want you to always think, if this was my business, what would I do?
Mm-hmm. And they all have you give out shares they all have participation, is that accurate?
We don't give out shares, but we have an LTIP, a long-term incentive plan, which is effectively shares. I say to everybody here, I say, look, I'm not going to give you shares because I'm never going to sell this business. You'll end up with shares in a business that you will never be able to do anything with. Right. It's not that people want shares per se. They want to share in the upside of the business. Right. And that's what the long-term incentive plan does. So, every 4 years they will get a big payout. If we do well, they get a big payout, equivalent to the increase in value of any shares they might have had. Mm. And I think it's important.
Brilliant, Nick. I really appreciate you coming on the show. So just to make it clear, anyone who wants to come visit your site, of course, or maybe even follow you, what would be the best way to track you down? I'm not saying, I don't want to have everyone call you and give you a telephone number, but what would be your favorite ways for people to know more?
I think, well, obviously, the best thing to do is to visit the site and buy loads of shirts.
Yeah, after the 18th of January in particular, I suppose.
After the 18th of January, with the new website. But that's www.ctshirts.co.uk. And the best way to track me down, I actually, on every shirt bag, it has my email address.
Oh, my gosh.
And my email address comes through to me, and if anybody wants to email me, my email is nickw@ctshirts.co.uk. And I think that's really important because I think a lot of people get they get a bit big for their boots, and they don't talk to customers anymore. And customers will tell you a hell of a lot about your business. Mm. They'll tell you more about your business than pretty much anybody else.
So, Nick, I've retained this key focus. That's a big deal. Customer, the importance of the primacy of customer satisfaction. And then the third one for me is the fact that you have the tortoise mentality and a private ownership. And that seems to be the three lessons for me. Thanks a lot for being on the show, Nick. Have a great day. Look forward to 2016 and the new site.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks for having listened to this recording of the Minter Dialogue Show. You'll find the show notes on themindset.com. That's mindset with a Y, where you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter at / subscribe. If you like the show, please do rate it in iTunes. That really makes my day. Happy trails, and enjoy Josh Sachs's Painted Fingers.
Oh, fill me with all your colors, any different way to rid me of the gray, and heal me with all your imperfections that you mention in your lack of self-security. Oh, I wouldn't care about the art form as long as you would feel warm, wrapped in canvas. Hold me tightly, slowly we would paint a lover's portrait with all your favorite shades, and we'd paint it with our fingers to show the world the way we feel. Oh, the way we feel. Oh, so messy. The ridges in our palms make colors blend and look ugly in the end, but they're pretty in their own disgusting values. We'd hang our portraits in the hallways, make our house guests cringe. Oh,